If you want to be an elite football player, speed is non-negotiable. Can you gain weight and get faster? How often should you train speed? And what are the biggest mistakes athletes make when trying to improve? Today, we answer all of these questions, and we're doing that with Jacob Cabezudo of Cab Training. He's one of the top speed coaches for football players. So, Jacob, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Of course. So, yeah, let's just jump right into it. You know, I know a lot of athletes probably hit you in the DMs, or they like come up to you like at a, any sort of event, and they'll be like, all right, coach, I need to get faster. So when they tell you that, what would be the first thing that you want to evaluate or you want to know about them?
So when I get an athlete coming up to me or coming up to their first evaluation session with me, most of them, 90% of them, don't know how fast they actually are, what their times actually are. They may have gotten a hand timed 40-yard dash at a camp or a clinic, or their coach had their hand time and they timed them a couple tenths of a second faster. And they just don't have a full idea of where they're at speed-wise. So it all starts with an evaluation. And at our evaluations, what we do is we test acceleration and we test top speed. So with our acceleration test, we do a 5-yard build up into a 10-yard sprint. So it's a 15-yard sprint where we time the back 10 yards. And then for our top end sprint, we have them run up 25 to 30 yards and time them for another 10 yards. So it's a good 35, 40-yard sprint, 10-yard fly. And getting those two numbers right then and there give me a good idea where they're at speed-wise, both on the short end of their sprint and the top end of their sprint. And I think that's kind of the root problem is most kids don't know where they're at and they don't know the standards for their age. I didn't know this until a couple of years ago when I started really testing athletes every single time we came out. And so if there's an athlete out there that needs help with their speed, step one is to know where you're at and get a professional's opinion on where you're at and
Yeah, I think it's funny, like we do it with strength training, we do our PRs, we have our numbers and everything, but then everyone says they want to get faster, but then there's no measurements. Like I just had a guy from Catapult on the podcast a couple weeks ago. And yeah, it was like that same thing of like, how can you manage your speed and build your speed when you don't even know your starting point?
Yeah. And it's crazy because there's a culture. And I think Tony Holler talks about it a lot. A bunch of other speed coaches that I would consider mentors that I haven't met yet, but they're still mentors. But there's a culture of strength where everybody gets their max for their squat and their deadlift, but there's no leaderboard in the weight room for speed or a leaderboard outside the coach's office for speed. And like Les Spellman and all the different top figureheads in speed training and coaching talk about that is every coach wants a fast, explosive athlete, but the main focus has just been strength. And it's the ability to translate that to speed that's really important.
I was about to go one way with this, but because you specifically mentioned the strength piece. So you talk about using strength for speed. Like, can you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah. So, I mean, from my personal experience in high school, I ran and I never got a laser time 40, but I ran a 4.6 hand time when I was a freshman in high school. And I never got below a 4.6 hand time 40 in high school, even though my squat max went up from 275 to 450. Like I gained so much weight on my squat, but it didn't translate to improved speed numbers. And so when it comes down to it, I think the missing link is plyometrics and actual high speed sprinting. And so I think my strength program in high school was second to none when it came to hypertrophy and improving strength numbers and raising our ceilings in that effect. But translating it to the field using high speed sprinting, which the only way you can high speed sprint is by timing your sprints, racing someone as fast or faster than you, or getting chased by someone as fast or faster than you. And if you do that 2 to 3 times a week, you're going to get faster. But then plyos, we didn't do enough broad jumps. We didn't do enough hurdle jumps. And so when you combine a really good strength program that utilizes percentages of your 1 rep max, proper hypertrophy and power phases, moving the bar fast, and then you combine that with plyometrics and high speed sprinting prior to those strength sessions, you're going to get the maximized results. So The weight room is important, but it's not the only thing. And that's where sprinting should come before the weight room, and then weight rooms right after.
What doesn't a lot of NFL players, don't they, a lot of them do plyometrics more than they do strength training necessarily in season? I feel like I've heard that a lot from certain athletes. Like I feel like Aaron Donald's big on plyometrics.
Yeah, definitely. And you see, there are definitely some like the Jalen Hurtses of the world and Nick Chubb who are famous for their major, massive squats in the off season and stuff. And that's fine. But a lot of pro athletes and a lot of higher level college athletes, they're doing a lot of unilateral movements, single leg movements, plyometrics. Christian McCaffrey's off season's a lot of track like focused exercises. There's isometrics that a lot of athletes use that arguably could be more beneficial than simply just focusing on bilateral movements like the squat and the deadlift. I feel like even though I had a great strength program in high school, if we focus more on single leg movements and put more energy into that bucket and improving and overloading that more than just the bilateral squat, we probably could have had less ACL injuries and more speed.
Yeah, I know. Like with recovery too, I guess I didn't really think about it that way too. Of yeah, some of those things can help, like you said, reduce some of those injuries. I work with a lot of PTs, and yeah, I guess I haven't gotten into like how much of that stuff, but I feel like you have to, especially when you're recovering. But hey, for preventative measures, like I think that's huge.
Yeah. And a lot of coaches, I'd say, I think it's Mike Boyle and I think Cal Dietz, they talk about isometrics a lot in just actual training, functional strength training, getting into positions strength wise that mimic the field. And most of the time, when we're running and cutting and jumping on the field, we're using one leg. And so that's something even I need to do better at with my own personal training of myself. But a lot of the times with the kids that I work with, we're doing a lot of single leg stuff when it comes to even when we're training multi-directional stuff. We're jumping off one leg, we're balancing on one leg, really trying to focus on improving that stability and balance.
So a lot of football players though they want to, the comment saying bigger, stronger, faster. It's like okay, you want to get bigger, but you also don't want to lose speed. I've seen certain say wide receivers, DBs who will not gain weight and they will be undersized for their position because they're so afraid to gain weight and lose speed. And then now we got the DNs and the linebackers. So how do you get bigger and get faster?
So it's tough because I feel like in high schools, in many high schools, they run too much and too low of an intensity. And you're just burning through calories. And so that doesn't help at all. But when it comes to what I can control, when it comes to the training of the athletes I work with, I'm telling them sprinting's a full body activity. It's not just a lower body activity. You are working your core, you're working your lats, you're working your shoulders in such indirect ways. You don't get sore in that way, but you're building muscles that you barely ever use from sprinting at a very high speed. I don't think players should be too worried about staying small if they're working speed because speed training is not a volume activity. You're not going very high volume. I think a lot of players underestimate how little volume, they overestimate the volume that they need to get faster, right? So a lot of kids are like, oh, I did 10 100-yard sprints yesterday. I should be good to go. Like, no, you cooked yourself yesterday doing 70% runs down the field. We, at our sessions, we do 2 to 4 extremely high speed sprints with full recovery. So you're not really burning that many calories and you're staying fast. You're getting the work that you need. I think a lot of the problem is athletes try to like dirty bulk and everything, and they end up causing themselves to scare themselves if they start eating just everything in sight. And when it comes to maintaining speed and improving speed, the fastest guys that I work with are jacked. I have a junior right now that I'm working with that runs 21.5 miles per hour. He runs a 4.65 laser timed 40 and full six pack, fully developed arms, fully developed chest, exactly what you want to see from a college football player as a junior in high school because he trains the right way. He trains in a fast twitch, high intensity, max recovery way, and he's still able to put on size. I wish I had before and after pictures of what he looked like as a freshman versus what he looks like now, but he is living proof. A lot of the guys that I've worked with are living proof of how you, even though you gain weight and you gain muscle, speed almost gets enhanced by muscle.
Yeah.
One of the things I also tell even the youth athletes I work with, the reason why a lot of the youth athletes I work with are slow is because they're not strong enough, right? It's just they're skinny, they're bony, and if they had some muscle put onto those bones, they'd be able to push off the ground. They would have longer strides, and it's really not just the muscle that you put on; it's the quality of the tissue, right? Fast twitch tissues.
Dude, that's good. Like I mean, I think about it like when I think about the bigger and the faster, part of it is also the same thing of like how you do it. Like if you're gaining 2 pounds a week, like consistently, then yeah, you're gonna slow down. But if you're doing like the half a pound a week, you're not doing like relying on the fast food and the mass gainers and things like that. Like, yeah, you are gonna get, like one of my guys, I give an example too of he gained 30 pounds over 8 months, but I mean, again, it was slow and steady, and he did get a little bit faster. And then after that, he worked on his speed training, and then he shaved his 60 from a 755 to 671. And so like, yeah, but he was still like 30-40 pounds heavier than he originally was. And it's that same thing of like, you got to have the right muscle, you've got to and then you got to put in the right foods, of course, on my end. But yeah, I guess I've never really thought about as much of the fast twitch stuff. So like, do you mind giving more examples of what that kind of training looks like what you take your athletes through?
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody talks about like slow feet don't eat, that phrase. I don't necessarily like that phrase because you have to have fast feet, but you also have to have fast, powerful feet. Speed and agility, regardless of the direction that you put the force in, it's all about putting max force in least amount of time. And so if you can, I think the key indicator and the key producer of fast twitch is plyometrics and sprinting. So if you sprint maximally and you jump and then you move the bar fast in the weight room, you're creating fast twitch motor patterns and signals to your muscles that create those fast twitch fibers. So when it comes down to it, a lot of the kids, they can move a lot of weight, right? They tell me, oh, my max today was 350, but they only run 16 miles per hour. It's because their muscles just don't have the ability to twitch. And so a lot of the things that we do, we do jump rope. Jump rope's huge for us just so we can get some quick foot reactivity from the lower leg. We also do max effort high knees. We do high knees in the warm up just to get warmed up, but also part of our workout is resisted high knees and max effort high knees. This is where, like I always say, I want purple faces. I want you to push everything out for 5 good seconds, moving your legs as fast as possible. Because if you don't train your body to relax and contract your muscles fast, you're not going to be able to relax and contract your muscles fast when sprinting at high speeds and moving on the field. And so we do jump rope, max effort high knees. We also do foot chops, which really, it's basically you are chopping your feet like you're about to do up downs, but you're moving slightly forward and you're hitting the ground as fast as you can and as hard as you can. So you can start really creating that connection to start moving your body faster. And so we're putting force into the ground at a high rate. I like calling them lawnmowers because we end up sounding like lawnmowers because our feet are chopping so fast, but it's creating that fast twitch signal that we need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense because yeah, when you first start accelerating, that's a lot of what you're doing is that chopping essentially. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of that momentum you're producing.
Right, and it's the rapid switching of the thighs, really. And obviously we need to have a good amount of range of motion between our legs when we run and when we accelerate. But what we have to do is we have to be able to not only just be able to bring the knee up fast when we run, but we have to also bring the foot down fast when we run. And a lot of people don't realize that everybody wants to worry about knee drive this and arm drive this. But if we don't put a lot of force into the ground quickly, we're not going to be able to react off the ground quickly, have faster strides, have longer strides, and be productive with every step that we make when we're running.
Okay. You've done your research.
Dude,
I just yeah.
it's hard because like I've done research and I've done all these courses online and I follow all these coaches online, but everybody's different that I train. There's kids who have stride length issues when I train them. There's kids who have stride frequency issues, the power force issues. And so when I see someone run, it's pretty quick to identify, all right, they have a flexibility issue. And so it's part research, but it's also part like getting out there and working with people and just seeing reps.
Yeah, I know. I think I feel like I'm the same way. Like you can learn all these things in school and do all the things, but then you got to apply it to your real humans that you're dealing with. So, but I can tell, like, even just from your website and stuff, like from an outside view of somebody who didn't know you at all before, like a couple weeks ago, basically, like I can tell how committed you are and like locked in you are and really just trying to help athletes just get fast.
Yeah. And it's so rewarding to see the improvements because in the past it was really just, oh yeah, my kid looks like they are faster, like they have the visual signs, okay, their body moves differently. But to be able to show analytics wise how much faster a kid's getting, it's so rewarding, and it's definitely a big time passion of mine. And I also like doing it on my own too, so I can adjust how I train the athletes that I work with based on what I'm doing with myself too and my own weaknesses.
Yeah. So when you are training guys or gals, how often are you working with them, or how often should they be training to get faster, like each week?
So I always recommend twice a week. And if possible, 3 times a week, but none of these kids have the ability schedule wise to train 3 times a week. So twice a week is really that sweet spot because any more, we're probably tacking on too much volume that they're already getting at their practices and in their games and tournaments. 2 times a week is perfect because speed detrains within 5 to 7 days. It's a lot different from strength and conditioning and muscle building. Like you can maintain muscle even after you take a month off of strength training, as long as you're eating right, and you can maintain muscle and strength to a degree. But when it comes to speed's so touchy. If you take 2 weeks off, there's a really good chance that your speed is going to diminish. And let alone if you take a couple months off. Now, obviously, there's things that you can't control, like injuries and stuff like that, that hold you out for more than a month or so. Then yeah, that's just something we can't control. But I really suggest 2 to 3 times a week of high speed sprinting. One day is focused on acceleration, so short burst stuff. We do a lot of horizontal force production, so pulling sleds, doing broad jumps. And then the second day is more of a vertical force emphasis, top end speed, more upright sprint mechanics, and longer sprints.
Okay. So one thing I did want to highlight too with that, I try to tell my athletes, like, because of that fear of getting slow is when they're gaining size, is like, yeah, like also doing it a couple times a week, because part of it's like, okay, if you're gaining size but you're not training speed, then yeah, you're probably going to lose speed. But if you're, and I think that's huge that you highlight that there is a short window on that, like a shorter window compared to strength training, where you can lose it a lot quicker. Because I sure didn't know that. And I had those kind of like genetics where I do have more of that explosiveness in my genes. Like my brother was like 5'11" and he could dunk. He had that explosiveness, but like but yeah, if you don't train it, then you're not going to really maximize it.
Absolutely. There's a connection there for sure. So for the athletes that are scared to lose speed when they gain size, just stay up on your speed while you're making a commitment to gain size. It's really that simple. I've had kids throughout this whole off season gain 10 to 15 pounds and still have very solid speed improvements, and they're going along their developmental track in a very smart way by, like you said earlier, gaining a half a pound to a pound a week. And I mean, if you realize like 6 months of an off season, and you gain half a pound to a pound per week, that's 20, 25 pounds that you gain in an off season. For a high school athlete, that is pretty damn successful in my book, especially if you can maintain or improve your speed while doing that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So for the athletes though, I know there's a lot of them that listen they don't have access to people like you. And I know you have your social media, which I definitely recommend people go to your, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. But what are some basic drills or some key drills that they can do at home to maintain this kind of stuff and build this?
Yeah, absolutely. My biggest thing is if you are balling on a budget when it comes to speed training, you should at least buy a $5 stopwatch, get a friend, get a parent. When I was in high school, it's funny, I would have my mom come out to the field with me and time my 40-yard dashes with a stopwatch. And I'd get mad at her if it was like worse than I thought it was going to be, because I thought she was doing something wrong, but it was at least something where I was running as fast as I possibly could, getting timed by somebody. All you really need to do is sprint extremely fast, getting timed by someone. If you have a hill in your area, a hill is perfect. Another key training principle that I have, and I borrowed it from somebody. Everything, and that's one thing, everything that I have, somebody else has thought of it and implemented it before. But one of the biggest things that I think is a huge part of your speed training is making sure that you rest 1 minute per 10 yards that you sprint. If you run a 40-yard dash, you should be resting 4 minutes. If you run a hill that's 20 yards long, you should be resting 2 minutes per hill sprint. And hills does not have to be a conditioning method. It should be a speed training method. So when you go to a hill around your neighborhood or around your area, go to that hill, run for the intention of running your absolute fastest up the hill, and then fully recover before the next one. There's no secret special drill that you can do that's going to get you faster outside of sprinting to the maximum of your ability. Outside of sprinting, things that can help you enhance your speed is jumping. So doing box jumps, doing depth drops, jumping over hurdles if your high school has hurdles readily available, doing broad jumps. What I do when I train my broad jumps is I just get a tape measure out and I measure my broad jump. And just because you're measuring your broad jump doesn't mean that it's not training. You are training your broad jump, especially when you're measuring it. So doing those types of things, if you go out and spend $20 on a stopwatch, tape measure, and a jump rope, that's all you need for speed training. And you train 2 to 3 times a week of running as fast as you can, jump rope 5 minutes a day, and measure your broad jump twice a week and hurdle jump once or twice a week, you're going to see a lot of good results.
Dude, you're making me want to go and I got a steep hill right outside my house. I'm like, I want to go do some hills after this. How many oh, sorry.
No. It's fun. I have to motivate people, because it's one of the biggest things when it comes to training is you have to take it home, especially for the athletes that only train once a week with me. Like, if you don't take it home and you don't do the stretches that I tell you to do or the little things that you need to do, you're not gonna get the best results. So I always like to motivate people in that way and empower them to take the steps necessary to be the fastest athlete they can.
So if you were doing hills, like you said, full rest in between, how many hill sprints, I guess, would you be aiming for?
It depends on the length of the hill, and this applies to all types of sprinting. The amount of reps that you do sprinting depends on the distance that you run. It's just like how much volume you squat. You're not going to squat 95% of your max for 10 to 12 reps. You're going to do 1, maybe 2 or 3 if possible. So with acceleration, let's just say hills and acceleration are one and the same. You want to sprint anywhere between 6 to 10 reps of 10 to 25 yards. That's all you need for acceleration. And they have to be very, very high quality sprints. So 6 to 10 reps of 10 to 25 yards. If I'm doing sled sprints that day, we're probably going to do 5 unresisted sprints and 5 sled sprints. And then for top speed days, we're doing 2, maybe 3 40-yard sprints. And so you could obviously mess with the range there. You can go anywhere between 30 and 60 yards of high speed running each sprint. So 2 to 3 reps of those. But the key to the top speed days is making sure we reach our top speed, which you generally reach between 30 and 40 yards if you're a well-trained athlete. And so when you're running a hill, it just depends on the length of the hill. A lot of the hills around me are between 20 and 40 yards. So that means I'm running anywhere between 6 and 8 hills at full recovery. And then I'm cooked. Like you realize like on your last set of squats that your legs can't go any longer. When it comes to sprinting, that's when you stop. When you see a 10% dip in your performance when sprinting, that's when you stop.
That's good, dude. Like I said, you really like have worked these things out, and I think that's huge. And I think that makes you again even more valuable of a coach of recognizing those limits and figuring those out, not just from the research or the experts like Les Spellman and whatnot, but like the tried and true of like actually like doing it with your people.
Yeah, I always preach quality over quantity. And so when it comes to every individual athlete, I know when they're dragging. Like I know when someone's like absolutely cooked during a session, like we're not running again. I'm not going to run you just because I don't like your effort. It's because something's up. You probably got 5 hours of sleep texting your girlfriend last night. That's why you're not energetic. So you're going to not run as much as you should today.
Yeah. So I mean, on that note, mistakes that athletes make. What are some really common mistakes, whether it be technique mistakes or mechanics, or again some of those other outside mistakes that are impacting speed?
So I can go a bunch of different directions with this. I'll start with technique mistakes. And they're not mistakes that athletes make willingly. They're just natural biomechanical things that they have learned since a young age or some strength weakness that they have. The biggest thing that I tend to correct with athletes is making sure that they strike underneath their center of mass when they run. A lot of athletes, they try to reach their foot out in front of them and they strike out in front of their body. And what happens is a lot of that stress for each stride falls on the hamstring when that foot lands in front of the body. And so we do several different drills that focus on striking that foot down underneath the body rather than the foot cycling in front of you. That's why I absolutely hate B skips. And B skips are great for track sprinters who need that front side rotation of the leg. But we don't do B skips at my training sessions because I don't want to overemphasize the foot reaching out in front of the body and landing on the ground in front of us. I want us to have leverage with the ground. So a lot of the things we do marches where we snap the foot underneath, A skips focusing on snapping the foot underneath, high knees where we're in place. So we're teaching the pattern of extending the hip so the foot goes underneath the body, right? That's one of the key technique mistakes that I see athletes make. The other is too much backside motion. So when you're running, there's front side motion where the knee comes in front of the body, and then the backside motion is where the foot and the knee track behind the body. And both are necessary parts of the sprint, but a lot of the athletes I work with have way too much backswing in their leg, and that causes them to rotate and fall in front of themselves. So both of those mistakes feed one another, and I just focus on something that Tony Holler says is being big in the front. So bringing that knee up in the front, having that thigh, that hip flexor pull that thigh up, and then snapping that foot down underneath the body, just like I was saying with the mistakes. On another end of mistakes athletes make, I think this might be just the sports landscape today as a whole. It places a much larger emphasis on tournaments, competitions, leagues, and much less of an emphasis on development and personal improvement. And of course, as a trainer, I'm super biased because I know the value of training. But I think a lot of coaches, a lot of parents don't fully understand the value that training and developing an athlete's physical capabilities, how valuable that is in the long run when it comes to overall performance. So that's something that I see a huge mistake being made on both the athletes, the parents, and the coaches front is not understanding how important good focused training is.
Yeah, I know. And then there's so many reasons for that too. There's also the idea of like, okay, dual sport versus just playing one sport year round, doing 7-on-7, doing all the things. Cause it's like you kind of put yourself in this box of you're only doing these types of things. But when you do different types of things like speed training, or you maybe do another sport, like you're training that muscle in a new way to be able to like leverage it more effectively, I feel like.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And I never tell kids not to play another sport. I do, however, advise them whether or not they should do a second team in a given season. In my ideal world, an athlete does one sport, one team per season. That way they have enough time to dedicate time to training. Because a lot of the kids that I train, middle school kids, even some of the youth kids that I work with, they're doing their school team and they're doing a club team. And so they have practice every day of the week and games the other 2 days of the week. And that causes them to have zero time to actually focus on their speed, their agility, their strength, and any other skills and weaknesses that they can't address while just always in that constant rat race of games, tournaments, and practices.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the amount of repetition strain that puts, like, especially the games. Like, I hear it with soccer, and same exact thing of, they got their high school season and their league or their club season at the same time, so they're playing like 4 games in a weekend, and yeah, you're gonna have some ACL issues like doing a lot of that. Or baseball pitchers, they're throwing like 2-3 games in a week. It's just there's so many of those overlaps that, yeah, like no wonder we have so many injuries going on with all that repetitive stress.
Yeah, and those injuries are starting younger and younger and younger. I have young kids that I work with that are as young as 9, 10 years old that have shoulder problems, that have Tommy John elbow
Mhm.
problems at 9 years old. Like it's crazy. And then they're still going out there and pitching and throwing and cutting the same way every single day. And that's why it's so important being a multi-sport athlete, but then also providing these kids an off season where they can be a kid. They don't have to be burnt out during their entire 9-month season. I always tell the kids, and I know that's hard for them to listen to me because they're not fully in charge of their schedule. Sometimes parents call the shots often, but LeBron James spends 4 months out of the year not touching a basketball in the off season. He's chilling, he's resting, he's recovering, he's getting his body right. And then he picks up that basketball in August. So he's ready for training camp for 2 months before the season starts. And then he's back playing the way that he's supposed to play. You can take months off. And a lot of families don't understand that you can do that without falling behind.
Yeah, I know that it seems kind of, you seem like I can't be right, because when it's just like with speed, like if you don't train speed, like but it's, yeah, it's like it's just you're training different parts of your game, or you're developing, I should say. And that's not always training. I mean, recovery, those types of things. It's not, in a way, it's developing for sure.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not saying take time away from training. I'm saying take time away from competitive sport because there's a time to develop the physical aspects. And the best time is the off season. And then you can still work on build on that while you're in season. But when you could take 2 to 3 months off from actually playing in games, practicing, makes you appreciate your sport more. And it also gives you more time so you can focus on your athletic development, like speed and strength and gaining weight for your sport. And so, yeah, it's a tough battle. I think a lot of parents just need better education on the process, and I think the system probably needs a little bit of a shakeup when it comes to youth and middle school and club sports overall.
Yeah, no, definitely agreed on that. As we wrap up, I want to go back to the momentum piece of it. So, what's the best way for athletes who are really serious about gaining speed, getting faster? What's the best way for them to take action like today?
So, if you have a track available to you, get on the track. Track is a bouncier surface. It allows you to run faster than you would on turf or grass. I would commit 2 days out of the week to sprinting as fast as you can, typically, ideally before your strength sessions. So if you have a strength class at your high school and it's in the afternoon, get up before school and do 3 or 4 high speed sprints the morning before those strength workouts. Continuously work on your flexibility. Couple things that you could do to work on your flexibility. Most athletes I work with have tight hips. So doing some deep squat holds where your butt is as close to the ground as possible, and doing some hip flexor stretches, working on improving that length in the hip flexors, the split between your thighs, which is so important when making sure your stride length is expanded. Those are things that you could do on your own. But really, it's all about understanding the value of sprinting fast, recovering maximally, and maximizing the force that you produce. And part of that, the maximizing force, part of it comes from getting stronger, but a lot of it is moving weight faster and moving your body weight faster by doing plyometrics, repeat plyometrics. A lot of the stuff plyometric wise, a lot of the plyometrics that we do are repeated. So we do hurdle hops where we spend least amount of time on the ground as possible. Repeated broad jumps where we're going from jump to jump as fast as possible, creating momentum. Those types of things, they require minimal equipment, and you just need to focus on doing it consistently and not falling off. So 2 to 3 times a week with a acceleration emphasis on one day, top speed emphasis on another day, and you'll be set speed wise.
Yeah, dude, athletes, you got your blueprint right there. Like you got your plan. All you got to do is implement it. Just do it. But Jacob, I just want to thank you so much for hopping on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. And athletes, if you have any questions, shoot me a DM. I appreciate any feedback or questions you may have.
Yeah, and then he's on Cap Training, so if you look in the show notes, look in the caption below, and you'll get his Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. Did I miss one there, or those are the big three, right?
That's pretty much it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sweet. But yeah, seriously, go check him out. He's got other drills, other ideas for you, so you can continue use your social media to your advantage. Use it to help you versus to make you not sleep at night. But yeah, Jacob, thanks again.
Thanks so much, Nick.
Yeah. And then, again, athletes, you got your blueprint, you got your ideas, you got things that you can start implementing now. So just go and do it. And as always, keep striving for greatness.